I've always had a love for the Zelda franchise ever since I started playing video games. The first Zelda game I played was not Ocarina of Time, but was Majora's Mask. Having an understanding of how the story was from Ocarina of Time, hearing about the different aspects of the game from friends and family whom already had played and beaten the game, I was excited when I got the promotional Toys R Us exclusive VHS tape for Majora's Mask, of which I was thrilled that by the time my parents had me watch the video, they had already pre-ordered the game for me to play. As time went on until the game became available, I would try to understand how this would be different from Ocarina of Time, constantly rewatching the VHS tape to try to learn anything that I could. And when I finally got Majora's Mask and played it for myself, my 11-year-old self was blown away, both in the complexity of the game mechanics, which did take a bit of time to be able to fully understand, but the story was also very different than any other game that I had played up to this point. I spent so much time playing this game, trying to figure out all the ins and outs of collecting different masks, enjoying the boss fights using the Deku, Goron, and Zora masks, and eventually working my way to getting all of the masks to finally get my hands on the one remaining, the incredibly powerful Fierce Deity mask. However, being an adult and looking back on the game, as well as learning the origins of Majora and the Fierce Deity from manga, it brought to light something that I'd never questioned as a kid, but now I'm very fascinated with exploring further into. Was Majora actually a villain for the sake of just being an antagonist in this game, or is he a misunderstood character with a bigger story to tell? In this video, I'm going to do a deeper dive into the story as a whole, looking beyond the game itself to find clues to answer this question, using the manga to help understand who Majora's Mask is, what led up to him becoming the game's villain, and even if he is the true villain in the story. Before I continue further, I want to give a huge shout out to the YouTube channels Dr. Willy and Zeldum. The former has discussed the manga, and Zeldum looks into the theories behind Majora's evil presence, as well as the many different references of Majora's Mask throughout the game that may be difficult to find. Both videos will be linked down in the description below, and my video today will play as a continuation of theirs in understanding. Make sure to check out their videos for the full understanding of the fan theory that I'll be discussing today. With all that said, let's break down the villainy in The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The history behind the Fierce Deity mask and Majora's Mask is rather interesting in how it fits perfectly within how the game is played. Their prior interaction mirrors the game, just as Termina is a place that is supposed to mirror the emotions and the thoughts of the Skull Kid, not being a real place, as it exists outside of Hyrule, but rather only lives within the purpose of this game, and once the game is over, Termina fades away. Prior to the game, Majora was a dragon with great power, whom was protected by incredibly strong armor, of which also had the ability to grant wishes to the one wearing it. He protected the realm of neither the living or the dead, something similar to Purgatory, and all the while, many warriors would challenge Majora to try to take his power. Majora defeated all of those who challenged him, until the Fierce Deity came along and defeated him without the use of a weapon, not even taking one swing at him, but playing music to make Majora dance non-stop, and after 72 hours, Majora was dead. The Fierce Deity made Majora's Mask from his own skin, and had taken his armor from his corpse for his own use. How spirits would eventually become masks is through the Song of Healing. However, in this case, there was no healing for Majora, only death and dishonor and being made into a mask with his own flesh and blood to be kept as a trophy, by someone who he never fought, but who defeated Majora through song and time. Watch Dr. Willy's video for more information on this backstory within the manga. Over time, Majora's Mask would fall into the hands of the Garou, who could sense the darkness within the mask, not knowing what it is specifically, however, a power that they could see fit for their hexing rituals, which are rituals done by witches or in use of witchcraft. And over time, as Majora's spirit within the mask started to awaken through its use of its power for evil, the depth of the corruption from so much use within these evil rituals had started to take its toll. Even the most pure of heart of people, when forced to be used with such demonic, malicious rituals, could become corrupted, as was the case here for Majora's soul within the mask. The Garou noticed Majora's Mask had started to act on its own accord without the need of a host, and fearing the deeper power within that they had awoken, they hid the mask in the shadows and disappeared, with no trace to where they may have gone. Make sure to watch Zelda's video for more information on this fan theory. Much time had passed since then, allowing for the dark magic from all the hexing rituals to truly imprint on Majora's soul within the mask, once a protector and a warrior, now corrupted and evil and wanting revenge on the Fierce Deity. This lacks evidence, so speculation is needed for this next part to continue this theory. Majora's Mask, now in the present times, and realizing that the Fierce Deity no longer walks among the living, but he was healed and made into his own mask, most likely with the aid of the giants themselves that were once the friends of the Skull Kid. Majora's Mask wants to have the fight that he never got, to fight one-on-one as warriors. He wants the Fierce Deity back to his full strength and power, so he will need a host worthy of wearing the mask, and he will test such a warrior with tackling the greatest threats that would release the giants from their imprisonments of their own masks, to stop the moon from crashing down upon them, and give Majora's Mask the opportunity for redemption as a warrior to return to the world that he once knew as a protector. He actually wants the giants to stop the moon, because that's the place where he can fight the Fierce Deity without outside interference. A real one-on-one to see which of them is truly the more powerful warrior and who truly deserves to live. And if all else fails, the moon will crash down and still take out the Fierce Deity mask. To him, the process of which it occurs, in the end, is irrelevant. He just wants to take out the Fierce Deity by any means, but would like the opportunity to do it himself first before alternatives would be needed. Majora's Mask is now in the hands of the Happy Mask Salesman, letting him travel everywhere to find his own host whom he can corrupt and control as he sets up the encounter within the moon. The Skull Kid getting his hands on the mask is no coincidence, as he and Majora's Mask share something in common. Both of them have been wronged by the giants. Majora was mated to a mask and never healed, by an evil warrior whom was healed and mated to his own mask by the giants. This is just my theory, but the way I figured they could have done this is either by killing the Fierce Deity themselves, as he may have challenged their power, or they came across his corpse, and as each of them are the protectors of the four worlds, they knew who he was and what he had done with his life overall. Either way, then taking him to the Happy Mask Salesman for him to use the Song of Healing and turn the Fierce Deity into his own mask, helping to further explain why there's still evil within the mask. Even with being healed, the evil deeds that he had done in his lifetime continue to linger on inside of the mask. This could also explain how the Skull Kid got his hands on the mask once he donned Majora's Mask, stealing it from the Happy Mask Salesman. However, none of this is clearly explained, but left up to speculation. The Skull Kid was vulnerable, alone, feeling betrayed by those he considered friends, so he was the perfect fit for Majora's Mask's own corruption. Now a place is needed to set up the fight, a place that would solely serve the purpose of a warrior's calling, to protect others, to create stakes, and bring out their true power. Majora's Mask feeds into the Skull Kid's emotions, and through the Skull Kid creates Termina, translating to ends, as this will be the end of the Fierce Deity. It is a replica town of what we see in the Ocarina of Time, to give familiarity and hopefully more impact to the events to come for whoever would don the Fierce Deity mask. Now is the harder part, finding the worthy warrior who could handle the power of the Fierce Deity mask. It had to be someone who was strong, someone capable of defeating great threats, someone who was seen as a warrior, just as Majora was once before. He also wanted someone who could play music, as Majora's Mask wanted to give the Fierce Deity the same treatment and time given to him before his untimely death. While waiting for such a person to come around, Majora's Mask let off on his corruption of the Skull Kid to not raise questions of his fairy friends, Tattle and Tail, as they would join the Skull Kid in his mischief, but they had boundaries that they wouldn't cross, and things were much easier for Majora's Mask with their help. So he let the Skull Kid still be himself as he slowly put all the pieces together, as the Skull Kid wouldn't remember anything that happened to him while his body was taken over by Majora's Mask. While walking around, they came across someone on horseback, allowing Tattle and Tail to startle the horse and knock the rider off. Once they went over to the unconscious rider, the Skull Kid noticed the ocarina and started using it, one thing tackled off of Majora's Mask's list. Once Link regains consciousness and they all see him staring back at them, Link's sword becomes visible, showing that he is a warrior, another thing checked off of Majora's Mask's list. The Skull Kid then jumps on Link's horse and rides away, dragging Link and forcing him to give chase, and in doing so, purposely separating Tattle from himself and Tail, as she is more morally conscious of her actions, while her brother isn't, and without her keeping him in check, he will be much easier to sway into Majora's Mask's plans without great suspicion. Now is the setup for Link, to head to Termina and to show him what Link thinks is the greater threat, while hiding the greater intentions until Link has proved himself worthy of knowing what is actually going on behind the facade. Majora's Mask may appear to make mistakes here and there, especially for Link to get his ocarina back. However, everything is intentional and a test. Majora's Mask is hoping that Link will be able to overcome everything laid out before him and prove his worthiness of donning the Fierce Deity mask. Not only must Link prove himself in battle, but also prove his kindness with the people of Termina and the four surrounding worlds, just as Majora once did with the land that he protected. He makes all the tasks both challenging, but very rewarding, allowing the greatest of Link's strength to come to light and to strive to do greater each time, gaining more strength and bravery as a warrior. Once Link has found all of the masks and helped release all of the giants that were contained within the masks of the surrounding dungeon bosses, the stage was set for Majora's Mask to have his fight and get his revenge on the Fierce Deity. But there was still one task left for Link to accomplish. He must then give up all of the masks that harbored happiness, that Link received in kindness from helping those around him. He was allowed to keep the masks that were soulbound, as the spirits within those masks were in pain, a pain that was relived with each transformation into and out of those whose souls resided in the mask. And without the mask filled with happiness, once the Fierce Deity would be awakened once again, the pain from those souls in the mask would linger on to only help to hopefully bring more pain to the Fierce Deity once he understands the significance of the fight in front of him, confirming to Majora's Mask that the Fierce Deity is the actual villain in his eyes. Majora plays to Link's empathy with saying, "They've all gone, haven't they?" referencing both how the Skull Kid must have felt when the giants left, but also on how the happiness was now gone with giving up all the other masks, now leaving him only sadness and pain. Then, he offers him the Fierce Deity mask, of which is questioned to be as dark and evil as Majora's Mask, as the history of how the mask came about is tragic for Majora's soul. But despite being healed for the Fierce Deity, the selfish actions of his past are what influenced Majora's Mask to lead up to this moment. The true reasoning for how Majora's Mask came about the Fierce Deity mask is unfortunately unknown. Majora's Mask offers to play a game, and this is where he takes control and makes himself the hero, as he calls Link an Oni, meaning demon, and makes Link it and tag, continuing the theme throughout the game with Link chasing him up to this point, leading him to the room where the final face-off between these two powerful masks will collide in battle. Once inside the room, Majora's Mask's true intentions are finally made clear, and he also shows that he is the only mask able to control himself without the need of a host. However, the fierce deity still needs one, of which Link quickly puts on the mask to reveal and bring back to life Majora's true foe, the fierce deity. Majora's mask cannot transform back into his dragon form where the fierce deity originally slain him, because the mask was made of his own flesh, and the fierce deity is wearing his armor, causing Majora's soul to face him first as the mask itself as the simplest form, the very mask that the fierce deity made him to be when he first killed him countless years ago. From there, he transforms into his incarnation, which takes a much more erratic, very quick, showboating type of fighting style, similar to Tamatoa from Moana. As a means of taunting the fierce deity to attack him and potentially bring out his true power in his final transformation, his wrath, fully revealing the monster that he has become. This is where Majora's mask gets his most equal one-on-one with the fierce deity, warrior versus warrior, as the fierce deity has proven himself powerful enough to force Majora's mask into his strongest form, fully letting the evil, corrupted essence of the hexing rituals of the Garo to fuel his revenge, holding nothing back, embracing the madness as his likeliness to kill the fierce deity is starting to diminish. His desperation to win takes hold, and he's willing to do so here by any means necessary, and at any cost, as his backup plan with having the moon destroy Termina has been stopped. Majora's mask cannot afford to lose now. As Majora's mask forms progress from his mask to his wrath, his sense of self-control decreases and changes from being tactical to completely chaotic, and at times even childlike, especially with his laughter. As Majora's mask was worn by the Skull Kid, who acted childlike himself and is showing to have left an influence on him. His lack of control and letting his thirst for revenge take hold is Majora's mask's greatest weakness in this fight, as their first encounter was lost by Majora's unwilling lack of control over himself while spellbound to dance for 72 hours. And now, in this fight, the one thing Majora's mask had been seeking since he was trapped within the mask made of his own flesh and blood, he is now willingly relinquishing his sense of self-control to allow such evil influences to give him the power he desperately needs to overcome defeating the fierce deity. However, for Majora's mask, the fierce deity is able to defeat him in the end, and put a stop to his evil once and for all. And with the fight coming to an end, the evil within Majora's mask has also become dispelled. Now just a hollow mask of neither good nor evil presence within it. So in the end, to answer the question, was Majora really just a villain in this game, or was he a misunderstood character with a bigger story to tell? As far as being a villain, Majora's mask was. However, Majora himself was never innately evil, but because of the events Majora's mask was involved with, both in being created into a mask by the foe who slain him without healing, followed by countless years as a ceremonial mask for the Garo's hexing rituals, his corrupted soul had been driven to embrace evil to fulfill what he felt was right. Similar to how Clyde Shelton in Law-Abiding Citizen, the Riddler in The Batman, and Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, for example, all were those who felt as though what they were doing was right in their own minds. However, in reality, were doing harm to others, even as far as to feel the need to kill if necessary, as it would be a necessary evil for them to fulfill their goals in the end. They didn't abide by moral codes or laws to try to fulfill their needs, and Majora's mask was the same way. However, the fierce deity is not without judgment as well. His actions in initially killing Majora led to all the events discussed in this video. The manner in which he killed Majora had no honor as a warrior, no test of strength or skill, rather just biding time. And in this case, 3 days or 72 hours for Majora to dance himself to death is one of the biggest factors in Majora's mask's plot for revenge. To actually fight the fierce deity as equals, to see who is the greater warrior, is all because of the fierce deity's actions in their first encounter. However, for him to have taken such an action and eventually be healed into his own mask, to which has been said by Eiji Aonuma that, the best that I can give you is a suggestion. The best way to think about it is that all the memories of all the people in Termina are inside of the fierce deity mask. Taking that into consideration, there is still happiness and good within the mask. Having the happiness of all those within Termina, the fierce deity must have done enough in his lifetime to be considered redeemable after killing Majora and making him into a mask of his own flesh and blood. As far as the story, to my knowledge, of the true reasoning of him being made into a mask afterwards, seems to remain a mystery to this day. One additional point to remember about all of this, Termina is supposed to be considered a place created by the emotions and the memories of the Skull Kid, to not truly exist outside of the purposes of this game. And once the fight with Majora's mask is done and Link moves on, Termina disappears. So in considering that into the idea if Majora's mask is truly evil for the sake of being evil, some could argue that what would happen in a place that doesn't exist can't truly be considered evil, as nothing within it, including the people, are real. However, even considering that point, the intention of the actions being done are what I'm measuring the argument by, and Majora's mask's intentions showed nothing but malicious intent, and he followed through with his plans until the very end, never swaying from or reconsidering the consequences of his actions, and all of those who would be affected by said actions. It's sad to think of all the torture and evil that Majora's soul had to endure whilst locked away in his mask that his soul was made into without healing, then being used by the Garo for their own evil purposes, having hatred and malice slowly growing within him and consuming his own thoughts in the process, taking someone like Majora, with once incredible strength and regard, to fall so far and take part in the very evil that he saw within the fierce deity, and be bested once again, driven to the deepest depths of madness and despair, reawakened as evil incarnated.